workers who are occupying a gas rig at the Cammell Laird shipyard in Birkenhead have been urged to abandon their protest. The Labour MP, Mr. Frank Field, has appealed to them not to play into the hands of those who want to close the yard.
The men are objecting to the rig's transfer to a French dry dock for completion work. They claim the move would virtually put the yard out of business.
Without the Mersey, Liverpool is nothing. It's a city founded upon maritime trade, upon ships, and more importantly, upon the people who built, serviced, and sailed them. For more than 150 years, Cammell Laird's yard across the water in Birkenhead was world famous as a shipbuilders, sending paddle steamers to Africa and the Orient, great liners steaming across the Atlantic, and warships to track down and sink the Bismarck during the Second World War. The story of the shipyard is therefore one of pride and achievement in the value of engineering skill and sheer hard work that brought wealth to these islands and protected their shores during Britain's darkest hour. For the people of Liverpool and Birkenhead, the shipyard brought jobs, security and dignity. It was the heart of the community and a power in the land. However, it was Liverpool's misfortune in the 1980s to be on a political fault line that divided the nation. The rulers from the ruled, the haves from the have-nots, and those who sought to strip out wealth from those who in reality had created it. Changes to the nature of the shipping industry hit the Mersey hard in the 1970s, but it was ultimately a ruthless political attack launched from Whitehall that finally brought Cammell Laird's to its knees. Margaret, as a senior member of the Conservative government, told the management of the yard, wants rid of shipbuilding. Faced by cutbacks, redundancies, and creeping privatization, Cammell Laird's was different because it decided to fight back. An ideological attack demands a political response. A strike was called on the 28th of June 1984, and a gas rig and a destroyer, the HMS Edinburgh, were occupied. In a display of solidarity, local tugboat operators refused to move any of the yard's vessels on the Mersey. A mass picket in September 1984 saw striking miners from the Lancashire coalfield lending their support. The strikers themselves were riggers, a close-knit bunch of young workers who'd known each other all their lives, grown up together, and they were mates in and out of work. For them, solidarity was far more than just a word. Socialism was a matter of the heart as well as the head, and belonging to your union, in this case the GMB, came naturally. There was a real carnival air at the beginning of the dispute. It was summer, and there was a sense of adventure and camaraderie, and a sense that you could really make a difference, that the yard could be saved and the strike could be won.
The strike actually just slowly crept up on us. He pushed us into that many corners. People tried to negotiate a peaceful way out without having to strike, but we felt the management was just very stubborn in their attitude and their outlook, and they were just determined to force our hand.
We had a document stating that the yard was going to close down, and that's why we wanted to fight for it, because we were a family. We all stuck together.
There's no way we'll give in. We've been threatened with every move under the sun, and what we're saying, no compromise. It's either our jobs or nothing.
However, the authorities were in no mood to negotiate. Battle lines were drawn and a state of siege set in. The strike was to last for 10 months and was to end in dramatic fashion.
We are under siege, but we just have to see what happens and play it by the ear. It's been 3 months now, and we don't aim to give in despite all the pressures.
Then they went to the High Court, and they got an injunction on us. Because we were now a sacked workforce, we were now trespassing.
All of a sudden, there was loads of police, and all they were doing was marching around the rig all the time. Then they said to us, if you don't come off the rig, they'll be fighting, and there could even be fatalities.
On the 1st of October 1984, the police swooped on the pickets who were occupying the gangway of the destroyer, arresting 10 of the men. The remaining 27 withdrew to the living quarters of the gas rig, pulling up the ladders behind them and preparing to make one last-ditch stand.
Not one single soul left that rig. They asked, does anyone want to leave? No one said no. So they threatened us with storming the place with so-called shock troops of the police, which when we pointed out all the barricades that weren't very safe, they had a second thought of that. And basically what happened in the end is we ran out of water. It was as pure and simple as that. The fight was still in us. We'd have stayed another 12 months.
With their water supply cut off and threats that the authorities were going to storm the platform with police or, according to the strikers, with military or special forces, the men elected to come ashore.
And we eventually walked down the gangway about 7:30 a.m. in the morning into police vans. Didn't actually touch the tarmac of the yard, off the gangway into the van.
Arrested for criminal trespass, they were to spend 28 days in the high-security Walton jail in solitary confinement.
And Walton jail was like going back into Victorian times. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It was unbelievable. And for a month, it was the most miserable time of my life that I've ever spent. I miss my family, I miss my kids, I miss my mum and dad, and it was absolutely horrendous.
There was 4 brothers on that. 4 of them were in the jail with us, the Albertinas. Unfortunately, the mother passed away while they were in there. And it was, you know, it's bad enough being in there, but to get news that your mother's passed away while you're in there, it was devastating. We just wanted to, I mean, if we could have done, we'd all just, come on, let's go, it's not worth this. You know, fortunately, they were let out for the funeral, but they even let, this is the type of people you're dealing with. Once they'd been to the mum's funeral, they came back into Walton jail. Most fellas wouldn't have done that. No, we've got to make a point. They went out in the morning, 7 o'clock, went to their own mother's funeral and come back after the funeral and come back into jail and served the rest of the sentence.
Each of the men were visited in their cells by the Solicitor General, who offered them immediate release if they admitted that what they did was wrong and purged their contempt. Not one of the men accepted his offer. They had gone into the fight together. They had stood side by side in the struggle, and they left jail together, unbroken and unrepentant.
It was on the Saturday morning when we were all taken out of our cells, and we were taken to the prison chapel. And we were all in the prison chapel when the Attorney General came in. The Attorney General addressed us and said, if we purged our contempt, we could be freed there and then. Every one of us, to a man, said no. And in fact, I don't know who started it, but someone started singing Faith of Our Fathers, and when we all walked in, joined in, this Attorney General then vacated the place. But what they did then, they took us all back to our cells. We were all put in our cells. And as I say, we were queued up in the cells. So they'd take one out individually and go in with the Attorney General and offer them freedom there and then if they purged their contempt. This was done to every individual, and every individual declined the offer of purging their contempt. The reason being that we thought we'd done nothing wrong. We thought we'd been fighting not only for our jobs, but for the jobs of generations to come. Why should we say we were sorry? We were actually proud then, and we're proud now of what we did.
What we're hearing from Eddie is the defence of fundamental rights that we are feeling increasingly challenged at European level. And therefore we need to unite in solidarity in defence of those fundamental rights, because if we lose those, then we lose every scrap of integrity that we have in terms of a social Europe.
30 years on, the Cammell Laird strikers still have a burning case of injustice, having lost their jobs, their liberty and their livelihood.
I've never been in a police station in my life. I've never been in a court, but I've spent a month in Walton jail while my mother died. And I'll never forget that. So pardon is the only justification, not worried in money, just a pardon to say what we done was right.
However, they wrote a fresh chapter in the history of the GMB, etched in the story of their sacrifice, their struggle for a better tomorrow, and their belief in the core values of trade unionism. It was a battle fought against overwhelming odds, and a battle lost, but not lost in vain.
Some unions walked away from the fight. In solidarity, many of us stayed. Eddie and the families in the 37 struggled at times to get it out to a wider audience. But the remainder of the people that stayed, it couldn't have been done without the union. Not just the industrial side of it, the political side, and also the legal side. We've showed that by example. What do unions give you? Well, they gave us strength in numbers, and more people now are coming along to the campaign and listening to what we had to say. At the time, it was highly political. It fell away, and thanks to Eddie Marnell, the families and the rest of the men, they've continued the campaign as union members. And throughout that period, they've always believed that the union would help them in solidarity.